Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Delta, the last plenary of our water journey, concluding in New Orleans, the site of IA's 2022 National Gathering. Here our panelists will discuss water in Junebug's Homecoming Project, which is a part of Imagining America's 2021 National Gathering, The Shape of Us, Waterways and Movements. My name is Ron Bechet, and I am a visual artist and a professor at Xavier University in New Orleans, where next year's IA gathering will happen. I, along with Mina Matlon, will be co-editing the upcoming edition of the IA Journal Public. Please remember, if you're interested, and spread the word, that the due date is October 29th. Before we get started, I have a few logistical items to cover. This session offers closed captioning. To access the closed captioning, click on the CC button found at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll have opportunities throughout our sessions to meet and interact with our presenters and our participants. And to begin, we invite you to use the chat to introduce yourself. We anticipate having time to answer a few questions, so should you have questions for our panelists, please place them in the chat. So let me introduce, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce to you this evening's, in our last plenary, our presenters this evening. Stephanie McKee Anderson is a performer, choreographer, educator, facilitator, and cultural organizer, born in Picayune, Mississippi, and raised in New Orleans. For the past 20 years, Stephanie has been involved with Junebug Productions, coming out of the Free Southern Theater. As an artist and an educator, she is deeply committed to creating work that supports social justice and aligns with the FST and Junebug legacy. Our next presenter is Sunni Patterson. She is a New Orleans native and visionary, and is internationally acclaimed poet, performer, workshop facilitator, certified spiritual life coach, consultant, and an initiated priestess and minister. Armed with an engaging story and voice, Sunni deliberately uses art, poetry, and praise to encourage dialogue, connectivity, spiritual awareness, and healing. She currently serves as a resident artist with both the City of New Orleans Claiborne Corridor Cultural Initiative and Junebug Productions. She's also co-founder, along with scientist and atmospheric chemist Cheryl Blazer, of environmental arts and public health organization Breath is Life. Jeremy Guyton, along with being a core artist with Junebug Production, he is also a company member of KM Dance Project and Go to the Road Productions, and a member of the inaugural Frame cohort. He is a performer, choreographer, educator, alchemist, dreamer, and New World conjurer. Born and raised in Los Angeles, the vibrations of the city trickled flesh and sinew and set the foundation for his movement vocabulary. And Frederick Hollywood Delahoussaye, better known as Wood, is a poet, producer, performer, director, MC, arts administrator, community leader, and activist whose purpose and passion in the liberation of Black people across the globe. He is a chief creative officer for the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, as well as lead artist for Junebug Productions' Homecoming Project. Wood also serves as a member of the National Advisory Board for Imagining America. When I asked Wood about this too, he just said about his jobs, he said his job is just come to work. So we will begin with a film about the second iteration of Junebug's Homecoming Project. It's about water and our relationship, although complicated, with it. So please sit back and relax, and we'll begin the film. Thank you.
I am a storyteller. Storyteller. Now I say storyteller instead of liar, because there's a heap of difference between a storyteller and a liar. A liar, that's somebody taking cover things over. mainly for his own private benefit. But storytelling now, that's somebody what you take and uncover things so everybody can get some good out of it.
Now, just when I thought I was building a house, turns out I was building a man and a heart in heaven. Each renovated room, flesh and bone, spirit and blood, thirsty for a future and a past and my present is somewhere in between having and having not. But I guess that's the story now most colored folk who consider other cities when New Orleans is enough. Or is it? Well, now what y'all say y'all come here to build again? What y'all say y'all come here to do? Oh, you come to remember. But now how far back you willing to go? You willing to go like levee building, like canal digging, swamp treading, river swimming, grand maroon ancestor bubbling through the concrete where sewage and water board can't hold us back, kind of back? Or just like, oh yeah, I went down there for Mardi Gras one year, got sloppy drunk on Bourbon Street, pissed everywhere, threw up all over. Now look, do you know the filth we have had to walk through? What we have had to wash? Do you know how much doesn't come out no matter the amount of water you use, how forceful you scrub? It's just in the cracks, in the crevices, in the intricate parts becomes DNA, permanent memory, and you, it becomes you. You, careful where you tread. Even the asphalt is ancestral. Now tell me again, what you say y'all come to build? What is it really that you came to be? Oh, you came to be remembered. But now tell me, how far back really are you willing to go?
flashing. It's in me, it's a part of me. It's been here before. Oh, it's in me, it's a part of me. It's been here before. It's been here before. See, it's in me, it's a part of me. It's been here before. Oh, it's in me, it's a part of me. It's been here before. Flowing in me, running through me, washing over me, cleansing me, covering me, oh, sprinkling. It's been here before.
As mother of the planet's living things, holding memory and mystery, healing flesh and rock, carving veins in mountainsides, water is the great collector, down to the molecular level. A somehow stable congregation of charged particles, positive and negative, held together by polarity as cells of an ever-decaying, ever-regenerating body. This polarity makes the molecules thirsty, makes them suck in salt and strip it down for parts, holding sodium and chloride apart, limbs bound, tongues cut out, bouncing and bobbing in darkness between charges through the vast glass fabric of the sea until they come to find again their familiar chemistry on the shores of some land they never imagined, restored by the light of the sun. Sounds barbaric, but do not hold this behavior against your mother. It is not her fault, only her nature. She must take and hold what comes to her and does not cut its way by gravity to the ground. She can be so nourishing, exalting what little things we make and are, her body a museum, a lost and found, here a bottle, there a hollow log, particles, pebbles, shipping vessels, messages, memory.
This was the night I selected to start on my journey to that free land of Canada, which I knew was somewhere under the North Star. About 10 o'clock at night, I selected the swiftest mule on the plantation and started for Lake Providence, which is about 90 miles northeast of Monroe and situated on the Mississippi River. The mule traveled like a deer for more than 4 hours, and it must have been very near 3 o'clock in the morning, for the roosters were crowing, when the old mule changed his mind. All at once he stopped, and I kept straight on over his head for about 10 feet and landed on my stomach in 6 inches of mud and water. When I regained my footing, he was standing just where I had left him when I went over his head. I again climbed onto his back and told him to go ahead, but he never moved no more than if he had been a dead mule. I patted him on the neck a while, and then again urged him to go ahead, and he turned around and looked me in the face as if to say, "I know just what you are doing. You are running away." And all at once he turned around in a perfect circle for about 5 minutes, and then started like the wind. Dear reader, you cannot even imagine what a predicament I was in. To return to my cabin before the blowing of the horn was impossible, for I was more than 30 miles away. It was Fallon's edict that every slave that failed to form in line 10 minutes after the sounding of the horn at 4 o'clock should receive 100 lashes. My clothing was completely saturated with mud and water, which made me look more like a big mud turtle than a human being. I was in a land where every white man was a Negro catcher, and every black man was worth his weight in gold. But something was to be done, and at once, for the rain had ceased to fall and the clouds were scattering in every direction, and by the morning star that was slowly moving up the horizon, I knew day was breaking. I left the highway and waded through mud and swampland until I reached the dense forest, and then continued my journey for a mile or two, back in the forest, and climbed a cypress tree. The fringe on a cypress tree is sufficient to make it impossible to discover a man except by close observation after he has climbed 25 or 30 feet from the ground. I was not afraid of being captured that day, unless by mere accident, for I was satisfied that the rain had not only made it impossible for the hounds to follow my trail, but it had also erased my footprints on the main highway. I selected the forks of a tree and lashed myself to the limbs with cypress bark and was soon fast asleep. In my dreams, I was again with my father and mother in my log cabin way up in old Virginia. During the day, I remained in my hiding place, and I was greatly refreshed by my day's rest, and the dry atmosphere had completely dried my clothing, and it was an easy matter for me to rid my clothing of the greater part of the mud and dirt by pounding and shaking them. I refilled my water bottle and started on my journey toward the town of Lake Providence, but my progress was very slow, as well as irksome, for I was compelled to keep clear of the highway and traveled across fields and swamps that were filled with insects and poisonous serpents. Compelled to travel under the cover of darkness, with no guide except the Mississippi River, and no light but the North Star. You who live in palaces and sleep in a feather bed can never imagine the hardships of the man who is traveling through mud and swamps in the dead hours of night, with no shelter but the canopy of heaven, and was startled at the rustle of every leaf, and the chirping of every cricket seemed to cry out, "Stop him, there he goes," and imagine he could hear voices whispering in the still midnight air. I was unaware of the vigilance kept along the banks of the Mississippi River between Vicksburg and Memphis for the capture of runaway slaves. I was not aware that both sides of the river was being patrolled night and day by those who made their livelihood by capturing escaped slaves, and thereby securing the rewards, which were frequently as high as $500 if captured alive, and 1/2 that sum for their dead bodies. I did not know that bloodhounds were let loose at all the accessible places of crossing in order to scent the tracks of anyone who might have crossed the river during the night unobserved. But I was soon made aware of these facts. About 9 o'clock in the morning, While snugly perched in the forks of a tree, I heard the old familiar howl of hounds, and although the sound was a long distance from me, yet I was sure a human being was being pursued. But whether it was myself or someone else, I was not able to determine. Bloodhounds are not fleet until within a few rods of their game. About 5 miles an hour is their ordinary gait when following a cold trail, or when their game is 2 or 3 miles ahead of them. But as they draw nearer, they double their speed, and they never tire and are as unerring as time itself. I have known them to follow a trail for 5 consecutive days and win their game. The owners of them generally follow on horseback and about a mile in the rear. About 10 minutes after hearing the first echoes of their howls, it was repeated, but was much nearer and more distinct. And then I knew that it was myself that was being pursued, and I determined to foil them if possible. I at once left my hiding place and started for the river, which was about a mile away, and when having run about 2/3 of the distance, they gave me another one of their terrible warnings that they were not more than a half mile behind me. The thoughts of freedom and the dread of Dick Fallon renewed my energy and doubled my speed in my superhuman efforts to reach the river. It was a race against time, a run for my life. I knew that if I could reach the river, it was possible to elude them by wading into the water along the bank and then retracing a few miles of my journey. The canebrake and underbrush that grew along the banks would conceal me, and the water would cover my trail. But it was a task beyond human strength and human speed to execute, for as I neared the river, the ground would not bear my weight only by slow and cautious tread. I was wading in 6 inches of mud and water, and the bogs and mounds were trembling and sinking beneath my feet, and another tremendous howl from a score of those pursuing man-eaters made my blood run cold. For they were not more than 100 rods behind me, while twice that distance must be traveled ere I could reach the river. It was sure death for me to be run down by that swarm of hunting tigers, for the men on horseback were perhaps a mile away, and I knew I would be torn limb from limb before they could possibly arrive. Reader, picture the scene, if possible, of a man running for his life, and a score of mad hounds pursuing him to drink his blood. There were no chasms, no cliffs, no places of concealment, no possible chance of escape, except by reaching that cypress tree and ascending beyond their reach ere they came sweeping down upon me. It was a crisis of my life, and although it happened nearly 50 years ago, yet it startles me, even now, in my old age. Buried alive. William Walker, 1892.
In the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. I remember the sounds. the waves crashing against the cradle of my childhood, flooding my empty spaces, a cleansing, a massacre. Did she tell you I made it? I often lie and say I lived through it, but there are so many pieces of me I left back there. Did you see my blood in the water? Flowed thick like skin required of the melanated ones. The nappy-headed, it was red like mama's eyes when there are no more tears left. Said I love you like she was unsure of return, unsure of breath or life. There is no comfort here. Did you see my blood in the water? See what has become of me. See how my memories drowned like black bodies jumping from slave ships, drowning in concrete jungles, dodging extinction, ducking erasure, wondering if the next moment is promised or stolen. Do you remember the sounds? The souls sucked from screaming survivors, standing in the warmth of sun. Only death awaits the neglected, the downtrodden, the overlooked and forgotten, the fatherless ones, claiming only half ourselves, when the only place you can go is the same space you lost everything. How can you find peace? It is so lonely here. Inside the love that desperation forces into hiding. In a room where too much has happened, in a life where too much has happened, when blood is our story, what songs do we sing? When every day we are a bullet away from drowning, a chokehold's reach from death, hashtags waiting our every breath, when every word must conjure, will you write us back above the water? Will you seed and vow to bloom new truth? Will you write us a righteous eruption? For we are not the face this America masks us with. We are not the words or sounds given. We are not the broken souls they attempt to bleed, stumbling through simplicity and greed, through prejudice and pain, through suicide and quicksand, from village to borough to block. If your voice could overwhelm the waters, what would it say to sons and daughters searching the tide lines for bottled messages from sunken slave ships? When you saw everything be taken away, and you had nothing more to give, they take aim at your memories. And the pieces begin to go missing. And the music begins to go silent. And the feet begin to go still. But it is then you must find new meaning in the moments. Like the hint of sun rays that bring forth the morning, we are awoken, reborn, and baptized, undefined, unstandardized. They will stare at your blackness, at your brilliance, at your heaven and your hells, culture rising from deep within your bones, deep inside your exposed walls. Nothing can hold you, conform or contain. You who pound feet into the ground, you architect of feather and crown, you who dare to make sounds with words and music, with magic and movement, you maker of life, basking in ancestral breath. Dive back into the waters and scrub our city black again. For the ancestors, for the children, for the water. For our relationship with water. When them children leave the water on. For the love of the water. Yeah, nah, I see you, boy.
I get excited every time I see that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a minute, and it got a little misty.
It's really nice to see you guys in the room. I'm Stephanie McKee Anderson of Junebug Productions, and it's my great honor to have this film seen as part of Imagining Americas. I sit and I think about how it opened with John O'Neill being there saying, "I am a storyteller." So for us, we are continuing the legacy of what it means to share authentic stories, to expand the canon of Black art, and to see what the power of storytelling and story sharing can mean inside of our communities in terms of finding spaces to figure out how to make this world a better place for all of us. And I think you guys did that beautifully in this new era of exploring things together but apart. I'm going to give a little bit of context about Junebug Productions. Junebug Productions is 40 years plus one. 40 years plus one with the pandemic year being that. We are considered the organizational successor of the Free Southern Theater. Free Southern Theater went on to become a huge voice in the Black arts movement and in theater as we know it, not just Black theater, but in theater, hugely influential. And those are the shoulders of which we stand on. We also stand on the shoulders of John O'Neill, the founder of, co-founder of Free Southern Theater and founder of Junebug Productions. So we're very happy to be here. And I'm really happy to be in conversation with all of you. So, you know, water is something I've been thinking about as you have as well. And just recently, I just came back from Wesleyan University, where we were working with the College of Environment there. And one of the things that was shared with us is that, you know, thinking about water, and this is real, that water is, it spends the average time inside the human body is about 8 hours, right? And then it evaporates and goes up into the air, but is inhaled by other people. But what I found is that if you are 50 years old, you have about a 60% chance of having inhaled a molecule of water that has passed through every human being on this earth. And that goes up to 80% if you're 70 years old. You have about an 80% chance of having inhaled a molecule of water. That blew my mind. And I feel like there are ways that we're exploring and that there are things that the body knows and that we know without somebody coming and telling us through science, right? And so one of the things I'm going to ask us to do before we get started, because I have lots of questions for y'all. One of the things we're going to get started by doing is asking you to introduce yourself, and I'll pass it on to, you know, since we're on Zoom, I'll pass it to you, is introducing yourself. And I'll invite you to name one curiosity that you have in the making of this film. And so I will start with Jeremy, if you can start us off, and then I'll go from there.
Yeah, certainly. Hello, family. Yeah, so Jeremy Guyton, and originally born and raised in Los Angeles. And at the time that the call went out, that we were going to be revising this or looking at how to bring this story to film, I was in Los Angeles. And so I had the ocean. I had the Pacific Ocean. And so I think in making this film and in bringing this story to the beach, to you know, in the stage version, there was a basin of water that we used. And so now that basin of water had become this large body of water. And so a curiosity was sort of how to harness or how to capture the power and the magic of this large body of water that is not contained to a basin in this narrative. And so yeah, that was one thing that I think I was sitting with and dwelling on as we went into filming this iteration of the piece.
Yeah. Jeremy, why don't you pass on and we'll keep going like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass it on to Sunni.
Hey, family. I'm Sunni. Here in New Orleans. You know, one thing you asked that question, Stephanie, what's funny is that everybody else had on short sleeves and all of these, you know, t-shirts and such. Here I have to have on this overcoat and hat and everything else. But it so happened that that particular day, it decided to turn abundantly cold. So that was a piece in and of itself. And of course, being at the river in this cold was, that was calling on some other kind of energies to come on through and warm us up in this in this process. Yeah, so that was one piece that I found very interesting in it. But it was also, I think, just on the technical part, right? Like, man, how was this going to happen? When, of course, we think about the beauty of the first water, right? At I forget where we did it. But when I think about how this was going to happen, and then just the idea of what water is and does, right? How it moves, that came through. So I said, well, okay, it's about water, so it's got to flow. So and it did. So I'm grateful to, you know, see it. And it's new things that I feel like I've found in watching it again today for some reason. But yeah, so that was something in creating it under, you know, the pandemic umbrella. But that's the beauty of art and how art at the same time mimics water. So I'm grateful for that process. Yeah. Woodrow.
Thank you, sis. Greetings, fam. Yes, as Sunni affectionately calls me, Woodrow, but Frederick Delahoussaye, lovingly known as Wood. If you say Frederick, I probably won't turn around, so just go ahead on and use Wood, it's fine. Yeah, it was interesting to think about, because as y'all were talking, I was thinking about the stage production, and you know, all of us being theater and on live stage folks, how we connect with that live audience, and you know, and thinking about the sounds and the smells of the room, how we touch on all senses, you know, kind of when we're in that space on stage. That's Kingston, y'all, up there. And you know, and then having to transform that onto this, yeah, like you say, inside of this little box, you know, on folks' Zoom screens and on folks' computers. It was a curiosity to think about how that was going to happen. But also, I know, I guess I might be able to speak for Sunni. I think Sunni and I didn't really write our pieces for this, so we were kind of like, we kind of had outlines of what was going to happen, and then when we got on stage, it kind of flowed out. So, you know, we did it that one time, and we had this beautiful experience. And then when he came back and was like, "Oh, we're gonna film," I was like, "Oh, I got to go write this down now. Like, got to figure out, you know, what I said and how I said it, and how to bring that back to life." But it was, but in thinking of, you know, that is the nature of water. You know what I'm saying? That it, we have to be subjects to the way it flows and its moods and its nature, how it moves in us and how it moves around us. And I think that ebb and flow is what we're able to bring the piece, you know, to what we saw. So I'll stop right there.
It never ceases to amaze me. I think that there is always a fascination, I know on my part, of water, but I think that that is, I don't think that that's unusual. I think there are so many artists that think about water and our relationship to water. As we were prepping for this, this session, we're reminded of Toni Morrison saying water having perfect memory, or The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes, or this beautiful essay that was done, it was written by Tom Dent, the photography by Roy Lewis, called River Road. And so there is something about memory that you just instinctively talked about, Sunni, because you say you come here to remember. So talk to me a little bit about memory and water.
Yeah, that's a big part. I think too, anytime first that I think of remember and this thing of memory in and of itself, I always think of the key word, the remember, to put back together again. And what does that mean for us? What does it mean for healing, right? What does it mean to become whole? What does it mean to not move compartmentalized? What does it mean to not leave our hearts at home, right? When we go to work, when we go to the grocery store, when we go wherever it is that we're going, to bring all of these parts, right? And what does that mean now? Also for just this aspect of water, like for us to know that we cannot live without it. It's something to know that you can't live without something, right? People, you have people who say, well, it doesn't matter. I don't have to, I don't need whatever the thing is, but water is like, oh, but you need me. So that's a pretty powerful, piece. So any other time I think about water, of course, I'm thinking about just this aspect of emotions, how things are moving in and out of us. What about our feelings? What about, how am I? So even when I say, how am I feeling? I'm using that for also just this thing of, how am I feeling? What do I want to feel? What makes me tear up? What makes me water? When you brought up the question, and we're texting here, it made me think about my grandmother, right? Who would say, this is a New Orleans grandmother, imagine in America, who would say, if you had to go to the bathroom, you got to make water. And so we knew what making water was, right? But even that in and of itself is how we use water for everything that we use it for, from baptisms to, how we make something sacred, to quote unquote, clean something off, to ritualize our lives, to enhance our lives, to quench your thirst, all of these kind of things. And it's helping to bring something back together in this aspect of memory, right? So even this thing of water, so I always think about that when I think of just this flow. I live right here by the river, so I'm there all the time. And, I think about just how this substance, even though, yes, there's the science and the technological stuff about boats and, how it sits, how it's constructed. But I think about this like, wow, this fluid, this stuff, this hydrogen and oxygen, this thing, and how it can hold, how it's so soft and so gentle, but it can hold up these huge boats, these huge iron barges, all of this metal and everything else, in all of its gentleness. But there is something that happens when that gentleness can wear off, and before you know it, you can drown.
Yeah.
So what does that? Yeah.
It's interesting because this is one of the things that we were, again, exploring, right? So in lots of ways, this is part of the Homecoming Project, but it was also part of Gomila, right? So one of the things that we sat down, when we talk about a complicated relationship. When we talk about African Americans and descendants of Africans, when we say a complicated relationship with water, then that means, like, what does it mean to both revere this water,
Yeah.
to also be afraid of it, to go to that water to worship for the most powerful deities, to be represented by these different bodies of water. And surprise, surprise, those deities happen to be women, right?
Yeah.
But we have these really fierce bodies of water that surround us even.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting down and thinking about the idea of it having perfect memory, which means that when we go and we created what we call Mr. Go, or the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, what we're doing is tampering with the way that the river naturally flows. So it feels to me that the river is constantly fighting to go back to what it knows and what it remembers.
Oh,
and
yeah, no, for sure. And because it can't be, that's the thing, even it's in its gentleness, in its softness, the way that it can move through cracks, it cannot be bound.
Yeah. So,
you know.
Yeah, Jeremy, so what does it mean to go to the water for forgiveness? What does it mean to ask water for forgiveness? What does that mean to you, if I were to say that?
Yeah. It makes me think about
I forgot my. This is organic. So we're on. Let me mute myself.
No, but it makes me think about like when you go to the water to kind of cast your hopes or cast your dreams. And I think in the same way, it's going to the water almost in a carry this away to bring back something anew. It's Sunni offers us, forgiveness, is forgiving up this notion of self in this moment to make space for a new. And so in that same relationship with water, but I also, but now I'm also thinking, globally where we are right now, we've deeply mismanaged how we treat water and how we are in relationship with water. So I think also there's a collective and global overhaul. I don't know if they're, so I feel like I'm trying to figure it out as I'm talking, which feels like it's rambling, but
that's okay. We could, it's okay to it's a heavy question. Forgiveness from water, it's a heavy question. What would, I'm sorry.
It almost, I guess, just to wrap it, just the other thought that's coming, it almost feels like we've gone, I don't know if this is possible, but it feels like we've gone past that. Like, it feels like we've gone beyond the place where that's even, I'm gonna sit with it.
I'm gonna say that I'm it's interesting because during the pandemic, there was this brief moment when there were hardly any cars out. This was the initial lockdown, right? Hardly any cars out on the street. Nobody was really going anywhere, talking about it. The sky was clearer. The air smelled different. The water looked different. It was though the earth had said, "Whoo, thank you. I just needed y'all to slow down for a second, to let me get myself together." And it was naturally regenerating itself, which is what it does. Like there are certain parts of nature just is regenerative, right? It figured out ways to like regenerate itself. And so there was that brief moment that we were there, but I'm gonna throw this question to Wood. If the river is constantly fighting to remember what it did and does what it does naturally, if we were to do that and just let it do what it does naturally, then how do we become more adaptable? What do we need to do?
I think we need to sit in those memories. You know, I think the you know, that first statement that you made, the complicated relationship we have with water. Listen, water in our you know, ancestral memory was, you know, often made a tool of violence, right? You know, we know about the conversation around the transatlantic slave trade. We know about you know, this idea of being sold downriver, right? You know, and those connotations. You know, I think about my pops. I forget the sister's name. Simone something, the sister who won the 100-meter, you know, swimming at the Olympics. You know, my father was like flabbergasted. You know, it was like a black girl in the pool, and it was like, yo, like, you know, because his memory is around, you know, the racial history around American swimming pools, right? And then black folks. Thank you. Somebody said Simone Manuel. Oh, that was you, Steph. Simone Manuel. You know, and thinking about that relationship, how, you know, I think I read it somewhere that, like, you know, something like 60% of black folks still don't know how to swim. You know, and Mama Anawa, when we were with Michaela at Lincoln Beach, you know, she learned how to swim until she was 67 years old. And it's like, you know, so you know, we sit in those memories, and I think it makes us have to adapt. You know, that idea of being sold downriver, but also, you know, those enslaved folks knew that, and Jeremy brings this out in his piece, like William Walker, I think some place in the piece, it's like, I have to cover my footprints with water, right? Or I dive into the swamp to make the dogs lose my scent. So, you know, as much as it was this memory of violence, it's also this memory of redemption, this memory of, you know, escape, you know, and what that meant, and thinking about that memory as well. You know, us, how we deal with hurricanes, but how we are resilient and come back from those moments as well. So I think the adaptation comes from sitting in those memories and then learning from that as well, right? Understanding that we can't duplicate what has been done. And I think that's how we adapt. If that answers your question, I don't know.
Yeah,
We organic like a mug, yeah.
We're still trying to figure this thing out before it's too late, right? We're trying to.
You know, but one more point.
Yeah.
You know, inside, because you know, Emmett Till just hit my mind too, right? His body being left in the river, and then that sparking an entire movement that has us in a much better place as a people. Not what we want to be, but much better. You know, so just those juxtapositions, you know, that agitation of coming of our relationship, that complication that you spoke about.
And of that memory, right? Of that memory that we talk about, of water having perfect memory, then that means that it would have all of these things as a part of it. Yes, go ahead, Jeremy.
Just one thing, as I was continuing to reflect, I'm wondering also if part of coming to water for forgiveness is a practice of gratitude. And so I was going back and thinking about what you hit us with at the beginning about, you know, when you're 50 years old, there's some sort of percentage, I forgot the statistic, but there's a percentage that you've now inhaled, or the molecules of water that have passed through your body have passed through every single person on the earth. So if I think about, because at first I was like, oh, how do I go to the ocean and ask for forgiveness? But if I think about, okay, well, by the time I'm 50, I've interacted, or there's a chance that I've interacted with every single molecule of water that has interacted with someone else on this earth, then the healing that I do within my body to make sure that the water that is entering my body, when it evaporates, because I'm not doing it, it's doing it. When it evaporates from my body back into the universe, back into the world, how am I shifting, or how am I holding that water with the level of care and love and gratitude that possibly the person before me or the generation before me couldn't or didn't know how to. And so that's maybe it's something with just working with the water that is passing through this vessel that's sitting within me right now. Can I start with that water and working with that water? And as I then push it back into the world and receive it from the world, is that sort of maybe this cycle of forgiveness that we could engage in?
Yes. That was the key for me. You took it. Thank you. No, it's that was the whole point. I think that our inner landscapes, what would be the word? We have become such a parched people. And so our inner landscapes, I'm saying, there's a longing for this aspect of water, right? Even though we are composed of so much of it. So it's this aspect of, again, memory. So I think the thing for me to offer as well, so even when you bring that up, stuff of forgiveness and what that means, it's like, can we entertain, and even when you said, Jeremy, you know, how we may be past this point, but can we just for a moment entertain that forgiveness is always there? Can we entertain for a moment that the wonder of water, the wonder of this element, the wonder of this reflection of myself is that it is not the thing that is fighting. Could it be that I am the thing that is fighting the memory of what is running through me, whatever this thing is that has been, you know, running through me. So Jeremy, that is, you know, a powerful piece when we think about, you know, like we say often that forgiveness, I'm for giving up. I'm for this. This is, I accept this. I'm for giving up an old notion of myself in order to gain a new perspective. And certainly that is what water allows us to do. It allows us to, you know, rinse our eyes of the scales that have formed. It allows us to, it allows tears to flow. It allows sweat to pop. So even in that, we can say quite often, you know, I hear people say often, well, you know, that's not my thing. I don't cry. And then when they do, it's like, oh, you know, this thing. But it really goes to really, how do these bodies pour libation, whether that's through tears, whether that's through the physical aspect of this pouring. But it still goes to these bodies being living, walking altars. And on altars, most of the time, there's water that's always there to represent this element that flows so freely, right, through all of us. So it's like, you know, this is a thing that truly connects us all, as you reminded us from, you know, from the very beginning, and just the connectivity that happens. So it's like every time we think of it, you know, this aspect of forgiveness and water, you know, asking water for forgiveness. And can we imagine water looking back at us as ourselves, because that's ultimately what is happening, and saying, do you forgive me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions over in the chat. If there are questions, this is the last call for those to come in, as you would say, because I'm going to go ahead and close us out. And I can't think of anybody better or words to close us out than our beloved Tom Dent. I just can't think of anything better, because he's like one who ties really in lots of ways all of us together as artists, right? In the way that so many of these strong artists have done. And it's this beautiful, it's a photo essay called River Road. The photos by Roy Lewis, like I said, and the words by Tom Dent. And I'll just read some of that as we close out. If you get a chance to check it out, you should. River Road is the twisting route of our existence in America. The route bends to the moods of the river, which quest after the sea. We are deposits along the route, creating energy. deepening grooves, darkening colors, seeking the sun, preparing for death, conjuring the vision of explosive flowers. River Road is the twine of our survival. Our journey in America began here, and our life here is a testament to our old age journey of tears. Travel this road and know who we are. It's been a pleasure being here. We are so happy to be in conversation. First of all, to be with family again and to see you, even though we're apart. I get so happy when I see your faces, and I miss you all dearly. But we're really happy to be able to be a part of this convening and to be able to share and to be able to continue the legacy of John O'Neill, of Free Southern Theater, and of so many artists that we know and we love. It has been an honor for us to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Steph, I know that the Imagine America conference will be in New Orleans this coming October 2022. So might be a moment for us to put this back on stage for those folks.
I think that's a great idea. Let's plant the seed publicly. Plant the seed publicly and let's see what happens.
Right. Put it in the atmosphere.
Oh yeah, let it rain down and be absorbed by everybody.
All our bodies, yeah.
At least 60, 80%. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see y'all, family. Love y'all.
I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Want to thank Stephanie for shouting out this Langston Hughes poem, "The Negro Speaks of Rivers," as I was planning to share it, and it was something that was resonating with me for the last 2 days. Memory, floating, ancestors, healing, flowing, consciousness, wisdom, more than land acknowledgement, symbiosis, living waters, relationship of spirit, healing, gratitude, ashe, ashe. My name is Kal Alston. I'm honored to be here with you in my role as the chair of the Imagining America National Advisory Board. I want to give a special thank you to our beautiful panelists and the work that they brought with them, to Stephanie, Jeremy, Sunni, Wood, and Junebug for tonight's participants and for the beautiful contribution to the closing of Imagining America's closing plenary. Whether those of you who are here attended one session or 5 sessions, I do believe there were moments and opportunities for sharing and wonder everywhere the last 2 days. I want to thank the conveners for each session, and I'm going to give a brief little shout out to the members of the National Advisory Board, Robin Rodriguez, who personed the opening session, and Wood Delahoussaye, who's appeared multiple times over the last 2 days, and our former member, Bechet. Eternal gratitude to Erica Colarenas, Mina Matlin, Aaron Sion, Trina Van Skindle, and Papiro for their tireless work on and off the Zoom screen. And thank you also with great humility and affection to the planning collective that's been so dynamic and essential over the past 2 years that we've been connecting with New Orleans. We also want to take a moment to gratefully acknowledge several of our 2021 National Gathering sponsors whose generous contributions have helped make this event possible. Bringing Theory to Practice, the UC Davis Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement, and the UC Davis Humanities Institute. All our friends who performed, exhibited, gave us ritual language and practice, and everyone in our communities here, near and far. Thank you so much for joining us the past 2 days. Next year in NOLA, for reals, for reals. So in gratitude and solidarity, I turn the podium now over to my Tulane colleagues, collaborators, and co-conspirators for the closing of this year's IA gathering. Ryan and Diane, Deanna, my brain's gone now. So I hand it over to you all.
Gracias. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Diana Soto Olson.
And I'm Ryan McBride. We're from Bobancha, New Orleans, Tulane University. We're with the Tulane Mellon Graduate Program in Community Engaged Scholarship, the Center for Public Service, and the School of Liberal Arts.
Working with Imagining America on this national gathering and planning for a national gathering next year is giving Tulane University graduate students and centers on campus, such as the Center for the Gulf South, the Center for Public Service, Carolyn Barber Pier, Center for Intercultural Life, the Newcomb Art Museum, Studio in the Woods, and many others, a fantastic opportunity to collaborate.
And we're excited to reach out to the steering committee with whom we've started meeting like before the pandemic. There's a remarkable group of local artists, activists, scholars, and cultural organizations. And we especially look forward to continuing to work with our colleagues at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center and Xavier University.
Academia needs collaborations like this one to break out of the limits of our disciplines and traditional practices and to help us reimagine what universities could be. Collaborations that call out systemic injustices and complicity.
And together, it's our hope that we can work to envision and build paths towards a more equitable, just, and liberatory future. So we hope you'll join us next year, 2022, in Bobancha, New Orleans.
At Tulane University.
We
have a little visual for you. By the way, we are in the outdoors classroom here on Uptown campus, and welcome everybody.
Thanks everyone. See you next year.